peeps. You're listening to She's My Cherry Pie, the baking podcast from the Cherry Bomb Podcast Network. I'm your host, Jessie Sheehan. I'm a baker, recipe developer, and cookbook author, and my 4th book is coming out this fall. Each Saturday, I'm hanging out with the sweetest bakers around and taking a deep dive into their signature bakes. My guest on today's episode is baker, food stylist, and cookbook author Benjamina Ebuehi. Benjamina was a quarter finalist on the Great British Bake Off, where she stood out for her approachable and creative recipes. Since then, she's written 3 baking books, including The New Way to Cake, A Good Day to Bake, and her newest, I'll Bring Dessert. I love that title. This celebration of shareable recipes is perfect for entertaining and features lots of simple treats to whip up in no time. I loved chatting with Benjamina about her experience on the Great British Bake Off, her tips and tricks for make-ahead desserts, and her recipe for Tarragon Plum Cobbler from I'll Bring Dessert. Benjamina and I share a similar approach to baking and recipe development. We both love no-nonsense, unfussy sweets, and I hope you enjoy our conversation as much as I did. Be sure to visit cherrybomb.com for Benjamina's recipe. Stay tuned for our chat. Thank you to Plugra Premium European-style butter for supporting today's show. As some of you know, I've been a big fan of Plugra for some time now and was introduced to it at my very first bakery job when I was just a newbie baker. Fast forward to today, I'm a professional baker, cookbook author, and recipe developer, and I continue to rely on Plugra for all my baking needs. My fridge is always stocked with Plugra sticks and solids. I especially love that Plugra contains 82% butter fat. The higher butter fat content means less moisture and more fat, and as bakers know, fat equals flavor. Plugra butter is also slow churned, making it more pliable and easy to work with. I do a lot of baking this time of year for work and for myself and my family. Comfy bakes like my pistachio chocolate anytime buns and cinnamon sugar buttermilk donut holes, and I always reach for Plugra unsalted butter. I've also been making a lot of yeasted breads lately, and I love the buttery flavor Plugra adds to my dough. Plugra Premium European-style butter is the perfect choice from professional kitchens to your home kitchen. Ask for Plugra at your favorite grocery store or visit plugra.com for a store locator and recipes. Peeps, the new Icons issue of Cherry Bomb's print magazine is here, and it features 3 culinary icons on the covers: Indian food superstar Madhur Jaffrey, Dr. Jessica B. Harris, and the Chinatown champion, Grace Young. Inside, you'll find stories on more incredible women in the world of food, plus recipes like Marcella Hazan's iconic tomato sauce. You can snag a copy or subscribe at cherrybomb.com, or pick up a copy at a retailer near you, like Kitchen Arts and Letters in New York City, Now Serving in LA, Moon Palace Books in Minneapolis, and Bold Fork Books in Washington, D.C. Check out cherrybomb.com for our complete list of retailers. Let's check in with today's guest. Benjamina! So happy to have you on She's My Cherry Pie and to chat cobbler with you and so much more.
I'm so excited to be here. Thanks for having me.
Of course. So you grew up in London in a Nigerian home with excellent cooks like your mom and your aunties, but there were no bakers. So if you wanted something sweet when you were little, you had to make it yourself. Also, there's not a lot of baked goods in Nigerian cuisine, correct? So I know you've always had a sweet tooth, a fascination with all things baking. Can you tell us about, I think it was when you were 14, about how you started baking?
So I think food in general has always been something I've been quite curious about, and just how you put flavors together. Like, I was a kid that would be in the kitchen with like family. But in terms of baking, my mum got me these like kids cookbooks that I would slowly work my way through and practice things. And then as I got a bit older, I just fell in love with it, and it became my hobby and something I would just do on the weekends, or like if there was a birthday coming up, I would be the one to make the little cupcakes. And then, as I got older, just had more time to experiment and play around with things. And it was just a hobby that I absolutely loved.
Can you tell us about anything sort of memorable that you baked as a kid that you were or still are like proud of, or it could be a failure? I like failures or successes.
Failures are always good. I do remember one thing. I tried to do this ombre cake. Back in the day, ombre cakes were very popular, where the actual cakes were different shades of blue. That was what I was trying to go for, like an underwater theme. Don't do any themed cakes now. But at the time, that was very popular. And I just picked up this food colouring from the supermarket, very cheap, very simple. And every cake just turned a different shade of brown instead of a different shade of blue. You know, being young, you just panic and you're like, oh my God, it's awful. And yeah, I remember that to this day because it was just absolutely... I spent so much money buying the ingredients and all the food colouring, and it was just 10 shades of brown. It was
It's a
awful.
brown ombre
Brown
rather
ombre.
than blue ombre.
Yeah.
So in 2016, you were on the Great British Bake Off, the 7th season, and you were only 23. You'd recently graduated from college. I mean, I think I know the answer to this, but was this a dream come true? I think I've read that you said it was like your favorite show.
Oh, I loved it. I remember like none of my friends watched it, none of my family watched it, so it would just be my thing. And I just watch Bake Off and catch up every week. And then so to be on it was just absolutely how. I just kept pinching myself like, how did I get here? I'm actually in the tent. This is insane. That's Mary Berry right there in front of me. That's Paul. The wildest thing. It took me so long to get my head around it. Like, you are going to be on the show. People are going to watch you. Insane.
Can you tell us how, is that like somebody slides into your DMs? Do you want to be on the Great British Bake Off? Like, how does it happen?
No, so it's an application process and I just applied. I didn't tell anyone. I thought, oh, you know, if I don't get on, no one has to know. It's fine, carry on. But at least I know that I gave it a go. So it's a really long process. You do a written form and then a telephone interview, then you have auditions and lots of different stages with producers, and you have to bake in groups and they film you when you're baking just to make sure you can bake and talk and not freeze up and all that stuff. So it's a very long process. Every stage that I kept going past was just, oh my gosh, I've got through. Oh my gosh, I've got through. Oh no, I might actually have to do this and then panic. But no, I did it and it was amazing.
You've said it was even more intense than you expected.
Way more intense.
Why? It looks so intense to me. How could it be more than that?
I don't know. Good point. It doesn't, thinking back, it does look quite crazy. I just think you underestimate how much practice you have to put in, and you're practicing alongside working. So everyone's doing their normal jobs and are trying to fit in practicing for shooting on the show that week. And you shoot 2 days in the week, so it could be a Tuesday and a Wednesday. And so to fit that in around your normal schedule, you just overthink things. I want to do this, I want to do that, I want to try this, I want to try new things, and I want to stand out, and just trying to think of new ideas every single week and then coming in and delivering. It's just mentally was exhausting, absolutely exhausting.
Can you tell us about something that you baked? Was it a huge success or a huge failure? Either one.
I think week 1 stood out. One, because it was the first week and it was everyone was nervous. The first time you're meeting the other bakers, the first time you're seeing everyone and seeing the tents. So the nerves were in the roof. It was so high. It was a white chocolate and hazelnut mirror glaze cake. And I remember making the buttercream and it just would not come together. It was like a Swiss meringue buttercream. I'd practiced this at home so many times and it just was not working. And then I just started crying because the panic, I was just like, I don't want to be the first one to go home. That was one of my things. If you get here, do not be the first one to go. And so just completely broke down, just crying like, oh my gosh, I'm going to go home. And it ended up being amazing. And the judges really loved it. It eventually somehow came together. The judges loved it. And so I think after that, I just kind of calmed down a bit and was like, okay, you've got this. It's fine. No more crying, please.
So your dessert style was described at the time that you were on the show as combining classic, simple flavors with fresh, modern style, maybe with an emphasis on presentation because you're not happy when things are not picture perfect. And you were praised for your approachable and creative recipes with unique flavor profiles. Would you say that still describes your style, or would you say your style has changed since then?
I think it's evolved slightly, but I would say that that's still kind of the core of it. I don't like things that are overly fussy or complicated. I think things should be approachable and, you should be able to look at something and think, yeah, I could make that. So I like that, and I like incorporating flavours that perhaps are a little bit unexpected but still really work and still make sense and, again, aren't overly technical. So I think that is still true. Maybe the presentation bit, I think I relaxed on that front. I definitely prefer it just a lot more as it would be if anyone was to make this in their house. I don't think it needs to be, everything has to be perfect and symmetrical, and just make it.
You're speaking my love language when you say that, because I'm actually, even though I'm like a cookbook writer and a recipe developer, I've been doing this for a long time, I'm not good at making things look good. It's just not my jam. I'm much more rustic, artisanal. I mean, you can use all those words, like those kind of fake words to describe when you're bad at it. But so I appreciate when people are sort of a little bit more chill about that. I still so appreciate people that make those gorgeous creations, but I'm a little bit more like you, less fussy,
less focus
a little
on
more approachable. Also, it is really nice as a consumer of cookbooks when you make something that actually looks like the photograph, and photograph isn't so
unachievable.
Exactly.
Yeah. Like, how do I get there? Why does mine never look like that? And it's just not nice. It's not a nice feeling.
And I see that in the style of the photography in your book. It's beautiful, but it doesn't look like, oh my God, I could never make that.
Exactly.
So your third cookbook is called I'll Bring Dessert. Love, love, love that title. I found it so inspiring reading through it. I'm already inspired by, there's a dessert in there with sort of a crust of made of like Rice Krispie cereal or Cocoa Krispies. There's flan in a loaf pan, which I think is brilliant. Mud cakes, cream puffs on a plate. I love that way of presenting cream puffs for dessert at a dinner party. Well, so those are all the things that inspire me. But I love the concept of the book. Can you unpack that for us?
I host quite a lot. I love having my friends around. I love to feed them, eat everything, come and let me just cook for you. And I also like to go out, I get invited to like friends' houses, and I'm always the person that will say, oh, I'll bring dessert. Don't worry, I'll do dessert. And I think over time, I was getting a bit in a rut. I would bring the same sorts of things. Like I'd either be a tiramisu, because everyone loves tiramisu, or some sort of cheesecake, or maybe some brownies, or an apple crumble, which is really popular in the UK. And I think I just noticed myself bringing the same sorts of things. And then I took to Instagram and was like, guys, if you were asked to bring dessert, what do you go for? Like, what would be your go-to? And everyone sort of said very similar things. It was tiramisu, it was cheesecakes, it was cookies or brownies, it was crumble or maybe a pie. And that was pretty much it. And I think that's when the light bulb was like, there's so much more we could do and bring for dessert. And it's very easy to kind of get stuck in that same old. And it's hard to find that new inspiration of what you could bring. And that's kind of how the book came about, of just trying to give people some more ideas of things that are still quite simple and not too crazy and extravagant, but would go down really well at any kind of dinner party or really relaxed gathering.
I love that. I also think in the book you describe the person who always brings dessert as the pudding provider.
Yes.
Oh my gosh. I have to start. I mean, that was part of the joy of reading your book, was all like, we say, if we like something, we say, oh, it's totally up my alley. But you guys say up my street.
It's right up my street.
Oh my God, I'm dying. I love street.
It's right up
my street and pudding provider are my two favorite things. I love that you're sort of giving us through this book all this inspiration for what to bring when we're invited out or what to make at home. I also love, and we've already touched on this in terms of your style, but it's not a fussy restaurant-style dessert book with lots of components. So there's a simplicity to it. Many of them are one dish. We call those one bowl, which I love. Easy to transport. And I also love how the chapters are arranged more by texture and flavor. And in my last book, I did something similar where I had like the nut chapter, the same way you did. Well, you can tell us what they're called, but I love the names.
So I split the chapters into something fruity, something chocolatey, something nutty, something creamy, and something on the side. And that's just literally how I think about what I want to bring for dessert. I'm like, someone says, oh, can you just bring dessert for this dinner I'm doing? I think, oh, what's the vibe? Do I want to do something nutty, something fruity? What's, who's going to be there? What's the vibe? What time of year is it? And so I thought, well, that's exactly how I try and think about what I want to bring. And that's how I decided to do the chapters. So I love them.
Because this is a book about, yes, making things at home, but also bringing them. I'll bring dessert. That there's a lot of talk about which ones can be made. Well, everything can be made in advance, but how to do so. So I love all those tips about how to transport them, etc. I also loved your reheating tip, just reminding people that if you've made, let's say, the cobbler, which we're going to talk about already, when you're reheating it at a friend's house or at home, we call it 300 degrees Fahrenheit. What would it be, Celsius?
It'll be Celsius, about 160 Celsius.
Just remember not to go too high in your reheating. I think I'm always like, 350.
Because it's just automatic, isn't it? But it's just a gentle reheat.
We're going to talk about your Tarragon Plum Cobbler specifically, but before we do, I just wanted to talk about cobblers generally.
Yes.
So you've described a cobbler as an ideal all-year-round sort of pudding. And for the listeners that don't know, pudding for you means dessert or sweet or treat.
Interchangeable.
All-year-round sort of pudding that can be thrown together fairly quickly without too much forward planning, which sounds like my ideal dessert. Describe for us what a cobbler is.
we don't really have many cobblers in the UK, I would say. We have
interesting.
more crumbles
Yep.
and pies. But even pies are not as popular as they are over here. So crumbles are the main thing we have.
Were you inspired by the United States?
Yes, this was definitely more American inspired because cobblers aren't a big thing.
That is fascinating.
They're not a big thing. I think they're slowly getting a bit more known in just regular mainstream food world, but they're still not as popular as crumbles. That's
Benjamina,
like number
that's
one.
so interesting
This was
because I would
definitely-
think, I feel like England and Ireland, it's like it's all about scones
Yeah,
and
and all those like
biscuits.
fruits and
those,
custard and pudding.
and basically a cobbler is a scone or a biscuit
Yeah.
on top of fruit.
Basically.
That's
So it's
so
not a big thing.
Interesting.
This was definitely inspired by the States.
Oh, I love that. I love
For
that.
sure. But even still, from a bit of research and like being in America sometimes and trying cobblers, they're all very different.
Mm-hmm.
So I've seen cobblers where it's more like a cake batter that's on top. And then I've seen cobblers that are more like biscuits on top and cobblers that are more, I guess, scraggly and, you know, a bit more rough. So I think even over here, cobblers can look different depending on where you're from. Is that
Yes,
right?
well, we have a funny thing because sometimes people use cobbler, crumble, and crisp all interchangeably. I do think of cobbler as like cobblestones,
Yeah.
so that the
Yeah.
top should have
Looks all-
this kind of, I think of it most traditionally as biscuity in that way that you describe, but you're absolutely right. People will make almost like just a looser biscuit dough
Yeah.
and put that over the top and then it's cake. Or I guess you could almost, it depends on your dough, but you could almost spread it with like a spatula on
Yeah.
top. But you're right. I think in general, I think people, when they read cobbler, think of something biscuit-y,
Yeah.
biscuit-y-ish. But you're right. Even here, it's a little
It could be a bit
confusing.
different.
And as we've said, a cobbler is different from a crumble. You also have your perfect apple crumble that's in the book, which is more like a streusel topping.
Yes.
And do you guys have cobblers, or there is in this book, you have crumbles. Do you have crisps? Because we also differentiate between a crisp and a crumble.
Oh.
Traditionally, a crisp has oats because it's crispier, and a crumble is more like streusel.
Oh, so we don't have crisps.
You don't say that.
Just crumble, but some crumbles have oats and some crumbles don't.
Oh,
But
there
they're
you
still
go.
both called crumbles.
Interesting. And crisps is also what you call potato chips.
And also a
so it might
crisp,
be a
yeah.
little
We've got
confusing.
savoury crisps.
Yeah. Okay, so the recipe we're going to talk about sounds so delicious. Tarragon Plum Cobbler, which makes sense because herbs and fruit are sort of your jam, pun intended. You describe the tarragon here as a quiet player that brings just enough aniseed and licorice vibes that'll still work for people like you and me who do not love licorice. But I wondered about how you came upon the pairing of tarragon and plums, only because I, in general, don't always use a lot of herbs, fresh herbs in my baking. I did recently write a savory, easy baking book and had to kind of explore my spice drawer in a way I never have. And I found that's a skill, knowing what I mean, that's such an obvious point. Of course it's a skill. But,
I know what you
knowing
mean.
what goes together. Like, how did you say to yourself, oh, if it's plums, it's definitely going to be tarragon. Or if I'm using tarragon, I'm definitely going to add
use
plums.
plums.
How did you know?
It was a lot of trial and error, to be honest. It wasn't an instant tarragon or plums, definitely let's do tarragon. I wanted to use tarragon because I do really enjoy that kind of fennel aniseed flavour that it has. So I don't like licorice, but I like that tarragon is a bit more subtle and a bit more gentle. So I knew I wanted to do that and was trying to play around with the fruits. I think I tried blackberries at first. Liked it, but didn't love it. I think the blackberries were just a bit too small and I wanted a fruit that was a bit chunkier. So from then, it was just a bit of trial and error and just seeing what could kind of fit. Apples were also quite a good one, but I didn't want to do an apple cobbler. I wanted something a bit more stone fruit. And then I just tried the plums and I thought, yeah, it's plums. It's got to be plums.
You say that this is best served warm from the oven, which is why you would probably pre-bake it, and then if you were bringing it to a friend's house, and then reheat it before you served it. And I love the way you write this, while the juices still have a little movement. And I love that way of articulating it. You can totally prep this beforehand and pop it into the oven and again, I love this. I'm going to just pull out all the lovely British things. Like you say, you'll pull it out of the oven while still on savory.
Yes.
Which to us would mean like while still eating dinner. I wondered about that because the biscuit dough wouldn't get soggy if it was sitting on the fruit? Or are you saying you've already pre-baked it and then you're just putting it in?
Yeah. So sometimes I'd already pre-bake it and then bake it at home and then take it over and then just warm it through. But you could definitely also make it ahead of time where they're not baked and put it on. And then if you keep it in the fridge, the biscuits still stay quite cold and then just straight into the oven.
Perfect. So we're going to preheat our oven to 375 Fahrenheit, which is...
I know 350 is 160, so 375 must be about 170 Celsius.
And that was not a test.
No, it's fine.
And I'm like, okay, Benjamina.
350.
So we're going to add superfine or caster sugar. So 2 questions. First of all, remind us what caster sugar is and why. Is this always in all British baking that the sugar is going to be super fine? You know, our granulated sugar is a little larger than your caster sugar.
So caster sugar is kind of the go-to for just standard baking. It's just always caster sugar. Our granulated sugar is more coarse than your granulated sugar. So it's just not great at dissolving. So caster is our regular. But for recipes like this, if you're in the US, your granulated sugar is fine. It's fine. You don't have to go and buy a special kind of sugar.
Great. So we're going to add some caster sugar or some regular sugar to some tarragon that's been destemmed.
Yes, okay. I just pop it off the stems.
Pop off the leaves, put them in with the caster sugar. We're going to add that to a food processor, and we're going to blitz it briefly to break down that tarragon. Now, I wondered, when I'm using like an herb with sugar or if I'm using lemon zest with sugar, I use my fingers to rub it into the sugar just to like activate the oils and to make it more flavorful and more fragrant. Is that what we're doing here with the food processor?
Pretty similar. And then it just also like evenly distributes all the bits of tarragon into it as well.
Love. It must be so pretty too. Does the
gorgeous.
Sugar turn kind of green?
Yeah, it's very pretty.
Love, love, love. Now we're going to add some small plums. And is there, I don't even know what we call them here, but we have like these kind of almost oblong-shaped plums that are purple. What should I be picturing? Are you using sort of round, red?
Yeah, our plums usually, like the ones you'd kind of just get anywhere, rounder, not so much oblong. Yeah, like a red skin and a nice like yellowy inside, or sometimes a darker red inside.
Those are so pretty. We have those too. I just wasn't sure when you said small plum, which one you're referring to. So we're going to add some small plums, some vanilla bean paste. I had 2 questions. Is there a brand of vanilla bean paste that you love? And if we don't have it, is it okay to use extract?
So always okay to use extract. I just prefer the paste because I love the speckles and the flavour. And I normally just use Nielsen Massey.
Yes.
Yeah, that's like my go-to.
Yep. And we're going to add these plums and the vanilla bean paste to a baking dish. Is there a particular type or brand that you would love to?
Not so much. Just anything that you think is like nice and pretty because that's when you're going to serve it in. So, yes.
Nice. And do you prefer ceramic to something metal or would both work?
Both would work. For something like this, I probably just tend to go for ceramic just because it's nice like from the oven to the table kind of dish.
And we're going to spoon that tarragon sugar that we just made on top of the plums and then mix them up until the plums are coated. Would we use our hands at this point?
You could definitely use hands or spoon if you want to just get, it's nice to kind of get in there and like massage it in a little bit.
I'm always saying like your hands are the best tool in the kitchen. I mean, I know it's a cliche,
but it's
so
true. It's true.
It's true. And they are handy. Now we're going to drizzle with a little water. Why do we drizzle with water?
So when I first was testing this and just put it straight in, a lot of the sugar just started to kind of burn on the edges a bit before the plums had time to like release their own juices. And so the water just kind of helped dissolve a bit of that sugar before it started to burn.
Nice. So we drizzle with a little water. Then we're going to cover the pan loosely with foil and we're going to bake in the oven for about 20 minutes until the plums have started to soften and release some of their juices. So a couple of questions. First, why do we do this? Why couldn't we just have the raw plums with the sugar, put the biscuit dough on top, and bake the whole thing together?
For some cobblers you would do that. When I was testing it, I found that plums didn't break down as much, and I wanted a really like jammy, soft, kind of squidgy plum. And putting them in raw, the biscuit dough would cook and then the plums would still be a little bit too firm. So I just prefer something that was a little softer and jammier. And so baking them first helps to release some of that juice and just start softening them up before the biscuit dough.
Does it also, I wondered, preclude the need for like I think you might call it corn flour, like a thickener? If you cook the fruit first, like people sometimes will do a pie filling where they cook it on the stovetop before they put it into their pie dough because they are worried that the filling will never cook in the time that it takes the pastry to brown. Because we cook the plums first, I noticed like there's no corn flour here.
No.
There's no tapioca. There's no starch.
No.
Or do you think a plum, in general, you wouldn't need that kind of thickener anyway to thicken its juices?
Because they don't tend to be like super like waterlogged, like some berries which will just release so much liquid. You're like, oh my gosh, what do I do with this? So I found plums to not need thickeners just because they're not as liquidy or waterlogged.
Like when you make your perfect crumble, which is without apples, do you use a thickener there?
I don't, no.
Okay.
No, I don't use thickener because I think usually once the apples cool, they kind of just like thicken naturally and you get a nice liquidy.
I might be guilty of always thinking I need a thickener when maybe I don't.
No, and sometimes you want a bit of juice.
Yeah,
a little bit.
yeah,
sometimes.
I know. I can sometimes be like, oh my God, it's leaking. And you're like, just a minute. That's the whole point of
It's
the
okay.
dessert. Leaks are good. So after about 20 minutes, released a little bit of their juice, softened, but we don't need to see any like bubbles or anything.
No, not at that point.
Okay. And then we're going to remove from the oven. We're going to set aside to cool a little or let cool completely if we're doing this all in advance. And now we're going to make the topping. And would you call these biscuits if you were explaining to somebody in the UK what a cobbler is? No.
Biscuits, because we think are like...
Oh, cookies.
Yeah, like nice little cookies. So
Yeah,
biscuits,
yeah.
we'd be like, what? That's not a biscuit?
Yeah. Would you describe it as like a scone?
Like a scone, yeah, very similar to a scone.
So now we're going to make the topping. We're going to add all-purpose flour and spelt flour. Why spelt? What is that adding to this dough?
I really like the nuttiness that it brought about. And it's one of those things, it's not compulsory. If you don't have it, you don't have to go and buy out. You can just use all plain flour. Especially with the plums, just a bit of that kind of like earthy nuttiness and a little bit more texture than just plain flour, I think works really well. So if you've got spelt, definitely add it in, but don't feel you have to.
And we're going to add some castor sugar, and we're going to mix this together in a bowl. Do you have a special kind of bowl that you like when you're in the kitchen? Do you like a glass bowl? Do you like a ceramic bowl or a metal bowl?
I tend to use glass. Just a good Pyrex glass bowl just does the job.
And also, I love them because I'm addicted to my microwave.
And you
can
just
melt
throw it
butter
in.
and chocolate
Yeah.
in the bowl, in the microwave,
I
pull
love
it
it.
out, add the rest of the
And
ingredients.
they've got all the sizes.
Yes.
It's just my go-to.
Yes, me too. Love. And then we're going to mix to combine. Do we mix this at this point since it's just dry ingredients, or is it a whisk?
Yeah, anything
Or a
really.
fork?
Anything you got next to you.
Yeah.
Just a quick combine.
And do you have a favorite kind of whisk?
Ooh.
Like a balloon whisk or a skinny?
I
or
tend to use just a balloon whisk.
Yep.
That's like just my
go-to.
easy, on hand.
Yep. So we're going to toss in some diced cold unsalted butter into this dry ingredient mixture, and we're going to use our fingertips to rub the flour mixture with the butter. What size are we looking for when we're done?
So it doesn't need to be super fine, but again, you also don't want really large chunks. So maybe the size of like maybe a pea, but like it's fine if you've got some a little bit bigger and a little bit smaller. So a bit uneven is fine.
Sometimes like peas and walnuts.
Yeah, peas and walnuts.
There you go. We're going to make a well in the center, and we're going to pour in some double cream, which is heavy cream, and then give a stir to combine with what, like a spatula or a wooden spoon?
I normally use like a table knife for this. I tend to always draw, when I'm making pastries or things like that, and don't want to kind of like over mix it, I just use like a table knife and give it a quick...
Ooh, interesting. So you're combining the cream into the dry ingredients with a like
with
kitchen
just
knife
a kitchen
or a
knife,
table knife.
just a regular knife.
I love that. I also wanted to mention that sometimes when I make a scone or a biscuit, I will make it with just cream, and I won't even add any of the butter. So it's like we call them like cream scones or cream biscuits, and it takes the place of all of the fat.
Oh, yeah.
They are so easy, obviously.
I should try that.
And
so just the cream.
I mean, obviously, you change the proportions.
Yeah.
There wouldn't be any butter. But yeah, it basically substituting the amount of butter you put in with extra cream.
I've got to
so
try
good,
that.
Benja. I can't believe I'm giving you.
I know.
I'm telling you something.
I love that. I'm actually going to try that.
Yeah,
just
it's
cream.
really good,
oh,
honey.
Yeah.
So good.
Yum.
So good. And just easy. So we're not going to overmix. We want a soft dough, but we're not going to overwork it. Then we're going to use a tablespoon. And when you say tablespoon, because now we're going to be portioning the dough on top of the plums, do you literally mean like a measuring spoon, like something that small?
No, so for this, I would say just a regular spoon you've got in your cutlery drawer.
Perfect. Take a spoon, and we're going to dollop the cobbler all over the plums, leaving some fruit poking through.
Yeah.
And it kind of looks from the picture, it almost does look like separate scone-type shapes. Is that sort of what you like, or do you like them to be? Sometimes I know that at the photo shoot, sometimes things get photographed that maybe were not always exactly how you intended. Is that what we should picture? We kind of want, like, for lack of a better word, like blobs of dough.
Yeah, no, blobs is good.
Okay, good. Okay, good.
Definitely blobs of dough, because I think I like it when it's a little bit separate, because they will spread a little bit when they bake, but it's nice when you can kind of see where it looks like a cobbled street.
Yeah, love that. Love that. And then we're going to bake for 30 to 35 minutes until the cobbler is golden and the fruit juice are bubbling underneath. And then we're going to serve the cobbler warm with ice cream or cold cream or custard.
Or custard. Personally, I don't do custard for this, but you could do custard with anything, to be honest with you, especially if you're British.
But your preference is either ice cream or
cream or cold cream for this.
You know Claire Saffitz, who said yes. So Claire was saying when she was a guest on the podcast to make an easy creme anglaise, which maybe is, I don't know, actually it's not too fancy for this. She takes really good vanilla ice cream and melts it in the microwave.
So just pourable ice cream.
Yes.
I'm intrigued. I don't know.
I've never done it.
I don't know.
But you know what? Last night I had some strawberry rhubarb crisp that I had made for a job, and I heated up, and then I took the little bit of ice cream that was left in the pint, the paper pint container. I warmed it up in the microwave and poured it over.
I am intrigued, but I don't know if I'm convinced yet.
Yeah. Maybe it's a hack.
Yeah, it's just if you need something, or let's just melt it down.
She said creme anglaise, which I don't know a recipe for that so well, but she said actually the ingredients are not that different.
Yeah, it's a custard like eggs and sugar and milk and
right.
I'm tempted to try it just to see.
I thought that was interesting. And then in terms of a make-ahead plan for this recipe, we could bake it up to one day ahead of time and reheat in the oven before serving. I wanted to talk about a couple of other recipes from the book that I am obsessed with. First of all, white chocolate and rosewater mud cakes. When we say mud cake, I think people would think of something like chocolatey.
And gooey and...
Yeah, but that is not what a mud cake is.
No, but this is also Australian. Mud cakes are huge in Australia.
Tell me everything. Yes. I'm totally obsessed.
Yeah. There's a lot of Australian-owned like cafes and bakeries in London. Mud cakes are very popular. From my research and chatting to people, mud cakes are much bigger over in Australia. And they're just called mud cakes because of the density. They're just really dense in a good way. Not like heavy and dry, but just moist, and the crumb is really like tightly packed. And you make them with like melted chocolate, and that's what gives it that nice like velvety, really tight crumb. So it's not a gooey cake. It's not like really fudgy, but it's just that really nicely packed crumb and like velvety texture.
I love that. And I think I missed the mud cake memo that they're always made with chocolate. So this might be a little bit of a creative thing on your part to make it with white chocolate. Like most people who think of mud cakes.
You think
chocolate.
Dark chocolate or milk chocolate.
Totally obsessed.
Yum.
Totally love the
Good.
name.
And
then
it's
also
not too sweet. Because you would think, a white chocolate cake, and there's a lot of white chocolate in it, but it's not sickly sweet, because I don't like sickly sweet desserts.
Well, I think you also said the rose water helps cut the sweetness
just a bit of
the white chocolate. And also, white chocolate is underrated. I feel like people don't realize.
Yeah, I like white chocolate. And I know people are like, I hate white chocolate. It's not real chocolate. I really enjoy white chocolate.
No, I agree with you. And the texture of this sounds incredible to me. And also, correct me if I'm wrong, but I think it's, as you would say, one dish, or as I would say, one bowl. It's very easy, right? You're melting chocolate, liquid, and
butter and milk.
And then add your
dry in a pan.
Done.
It's very quick. Very quick.
Honey.
And just yum. And it's one of those ones that does get better with age. So like have it the next day, and it's just like had time to relax and
love. The other thing totally blew my mind, chocolate and coconut breadcrumb cake, which you sort of say, I don't even know about breadcrumb cakes. That is not a thing. But you even say, like, I would buy bread and turn the bread into breadcrumbs to make this cake, which made me think that often people think of this cake as something to do with leftover bread. But you're saying just make it.
Just get the bread and then make the cake.
Talk to me about that. Texturally, what should I picture here? Because it's a little bit of flour, but mostly breadcrumbs.
Mostly breadcrumbs. And I had this at a restaurant once, and it was like breadcrumb cake, and it had plums in it. So it was like a fruity one. And it was just such the most pleasant, squidgy, moist texture. And I thought, this is absolutely delicious. And you don't taste bread, but it just gives it that really nice textural squidginess. In comparison to a cake, it's a little bit more crumbly, but it's just very squidgy, but in like a nice way. And
like
moist.
In a moist?
Yeah, really moist and squidgy. And the bread just like soaks up and expands a little bit. So it's quite like spongy as well.
And also chocolate and coconut.
I mean,
that's
come on.
The combo.
Come on.
The combo. Then one more that just blew my mind. First of all, you're a cheesecake lover. Yeah. Cheesecake and tiramisu, that is Benjamina.
Love it.
But you have this recipe. You have several cheesecake recipes in the book, but you have a no-bake, sweet and salty cheesecake. First of all, it has Ritz crackers on the bottom, which I really want to use an expletive, but I'm not going to. I really love. And then also, it is a spoonable cheesecake.
None of that.
You don't set it up in the fridge for so long that it turns sliceable.
No.
You serve it when it's still scoopable. Tell me everything.
I adore this recipe so
Oh
much.
my gosh.
There's a restaurant in London called Blacklock, and it's mainly like a chop house, so lots of meat, and they do amazing Sunday roasts. And they only have like 2 desserts on the menu, and one of them is this white chocolate cheesecake. And they literally come to your table and like scoop it and just dollop it in your bowl. And it's just so simple, but absolutely delicious. So that was the inspiration for this. And they use just regular like digestive biscuits or graham crackers in the base. And it's really chunky, very homely, very kind of slapped together. And so I wanted to do something that was sort of inspired by that, but slightly different. And so the sweet and salty, I mean, everyone loves sweet and salty. It's just like the best balance of everything. And was thinking about what I could use in the base. Originally, I thought maybe some like salted nuts with biscuits, but the Ritz crackers was like, oh my gosh, Ritz crackers. I love a Ritz cracker. They're salty and just buttery, and they go well with sweet stuff. People use chocolate and Ritz crackers all the time. So that was what I did for the base. And you do keep them quite chunky. You don't blitz it till it's fine. So you've got really like mismatched shapes in there.
Because it doesn't matter, right? Since you're scooping
you're gonna
it
scoop
anyway,
it.
you're not trying to cut it attractively.
So it's very
forgiving.
literally throw it together. And then the filling is condensed milk, which I think is one of the best things to come in a tin.
Literally my favorite ingredient.
Divine.
And I put it in Rice Krispie treats. Have you ever done that?
No.
Honey, add 1/3 cup. I don't know what the equivalent in grams is. 1/3 cup.
With the marshmallows and the butter.
Uh-huh.
Oh, I'll do that.
Benjamina,
I love condensed milk.
It is going to blow your mind.
That's
you
clever.
get this milky flavor. It stays softer, longer.
Of course. Yeah, that sounds like me. That's right up my street. Right up my street.
There you go. And I was going to use one of your words. What I love about this cheesecake is it has movement in it.
Yes.
And this is what I also thought was so interesting. So when I make a no-bake cheesecake, I use cream cheese and then a can of sweetened condensed milk. And then I usually use, I think, a little lemon juice, which weirdly reacts with the milk products.
And just helps
gels. Yeah. But so is this recipe... Probably the proportions are different. But if you were to put this into, I think you call them loose-bottomed pans.
Yes.
We call them spring-form pans. But if you were to put this recipe into a spring form and let it sit in the fridge for 8 hours, would it become sliceable? Or
it would be a bit firmer, but it wouldn't give you a nice, perfect slice.
Right.
It would still be like a soft
maybe that's the lack of the lemon juice, or maybe
or a bit
just
more
the
cream
proportions.
cheese.
Yeah.
There's not as much cream cheese.
This is so, because here's the thing about me. Don't tell anyone. I don't even like cheesecake. Like if it's baked.
Okay.
I know. Please still like me.
Do you like a Basque cheesecake?
I just made one for the first time. I loved it.
It's so good.
I loved it. Basque cheesecake. Oh my God.
Divine.
I love the texture because it's kind of gooey, might not be the right word, but it has more movement.
Yes, than a regular
cheesecake. But this no-bake is totally my jam, always. And then this idea that you don't even have to wait till it's sliceable.
No, put it in one big dish, let everyone scoop and serve. Simple. Bit of flaky sea salt on top. Done.
Honey, thank you so much for chatting with me today, Benjamina. And I just want to say that you are my cherry pie.
Thank you so much. I loved it.
That's it for today's show. Thank you to Plugra Premium European Style Butter for supporting today's show. Don't forget to subscribe to She's My Cherry Pie on Apple Podcasts or Spotify, and tell your pals about us. Don't forget to visit cherrybomb.com for today's recipe. She's My Cherry Pie is a production of the Cherry Bomb Podcast Network and is recorded at City Vogt Studio in Manhattan. Our producers are Kerry Diamond, Catherine Baker, and Elizabeth Vogt. Our associate producer is Jenna Sadu, and our content operations manager is London Crenshaw. Thank you so much for listening to She's My Cherry Pie, and happy baking.